Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. We reach hadith number 38. We're still in the unit about Iman. So this chapter is titled As-Salatu min al-Iman. Salah is part of Iman, and the Quran takes this even a step further by literally using the word Iman to reference Salah. وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُضِيعَ إِيمَانَكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not cause your Iman, meaning your Salah, to go to waste. Right? So Salah and Iman are so intertwined that some scholars ask the question, somebody who does not pray at all, are they even a believer? Right? And the Prophet ﷺ says that excuse me, what really differentiates a believer from a non-believer is Salah. Right? Or else when you look at other religions have forms of fasting, forms of charity, forms of pilgrimage, but no religion has what we call Salah. Right? So it really is what makes a believer unique. So this hadith عن البراء رضي الله تعالى عنه أن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام قال كان أول ما قدم المدينة نزل على أجداده من الأنصار. That the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, when he first arrived in Medina, he took a room, or he was sleeping in a place where his grandparents were. What does that mean? The Prophet's mother, Amina, is originally from Medina. So the Prophet's maternal uncles are native Medinans. So when he first arrived in Medina, he lived in a place where his uncles, his maternal side of the family used to live. وأنه صلى قبل بيت المقدس 16 شهرا أو 17 شهرا. And while the Prophet ﷺ was in Medina for the first 16 or 17 months, so about a year and a half, the Prophet ﷺ faced Jerusalem. Now, when the Prophet was in Mecca, he could face the Kaaba facing north. Right? He could position himself by the Kaaba, where when he faces the Kaaba, he's facing north. So this would line up with Jerusalem. So now the Prophet ﷺ, or at least then, he was praying towards both the Kaaba and Jerusalem. But when he went to Medina, Medina is north of Mecca, south of Jerusalem, it's either or. And the command was for him to face Jerusalem. But the Prophet ﷺ really wanted the Qibla to be Mecca. So he would constantly look up to the sky, hoping that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reveal verses that would change the Qibla to Mecca. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala documents this in Surah Al-Baqarah, قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ. And we see you constantly looking up to the sky, meaning you're waiting for the command to come to change the Qibla. So after 16, 17 months of being in Medina, the command was given. وَكَانَ يُعْجِبُهُ أَن تَكُونَ قبلته قبل البيت وأنه صلى أول صلاة صلاها صلاة العصر وصلى معه قوم فخرج رجل ممن صلى معه فمر على أهل مسجد وهم راكعون فقال أشهد بالله لقد صليت مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قبل مكة. So the command actually came to the Prophet ﷺ just before Asr prayer. And so he prayed Asr on that specific day towards Mecca. So that's when it was changed. And one of those who prayed with the Prophet ﷺ passed by another group of believers who were praying, but they were praying towards Jerusalem. So he told them while they were praying that I have just prayed with the Prophet towards Mecca, so face Mecca. So while they were praying, they turned around. Right? And they were in ruku' actually, when they heard this. So they flipped the salah, they flipped the qibla during salah. And this happened in what's known as today Masjid al-Qiblatayn. Maybe you visited it in an Umrah trip. Right? So I'm sure you know the story. That's where this particular incident happened. So this group of believers, they actually prayed to both qiblas in one salah. فداروا كما هم قبل البيت وكانت اليهود قد أعجبهم إذ كان يصلي قبل بيت المقدس وأهل الكتاب فلما ولى وجهه قبل البيت أنكروا ذلك. So here, Al-Bara radiallahu ta'ala said that when the Muslims were facing Jerusalem, that was pleasing to the people of the book, to the Jews. They liked the fact that Muslims were facing the Qibla, facing Jerusalem. Why? Because they saw this as a sign that Muslims were simply emulating the people of the book. Right? That the people of the book were the influential power that is moving Muslims. Right? So when the Qibla was changed, they got upset. It made them really mad. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of this is in the Quran. And this incident of changing the Qibla might seem like a very simple incident, so it's not a big deal. But the Quran dedicates nearly 2 pages of verses to this incident. And in fact, the command to face Mecca, to face the Kaaba, was repeated 6 times in a matter of 2 pages. In the realm of usul, like the science of understanding the rulings in Islam, when something is repeated, it indicates more emphasis. So salah, the command to pray, is repeated dozens of times, over 60 times, which tells us what? Salah is extremely important because no other, aside from Tawheed, there is nothing more commanded than salah. It's more commanded than zakah, more commanded than fasting, etc. So when Allah repeats the command 6 times in a matter of a few verses, that's indicating that this is a big deal. Why is it a big deal? Well, for one, it was a message to the people of the book that we are an independent ummah. We don't follow anyone. Because who faces the Qibla? Who faces Mecca? Only us. We're the only people who face Mecca, which is indication to the world we are independent from you in terms of our ideology. Right? Whereas Christians and Jews, Jerusalem is their holy place, right? And so there's overlap. The Christians include the Old Testament, what we call the Torah, in their Bible, and so they're connected with Judaism, but they're not connected with Judaism and the whole history. Isa alayhi salam is of the lineage of the children of Israel, so he's connected to the Jews, but not connected to the Jews. There's this overlap. But when it comes to the Muslims, it's pristine, it's pure. There's no one like us. There's no one who faces our Qibla. So that was one reason why this event is huge. We are not like you, and you're not like us. We're doing our own thing. So don't look at us as though we're followers of you. We're not. For the believers themselves, this was a big test. Right? It was a big test. Why? Because it exposed that some people from among the believing community were following the Prophet ﷺ for cultural reasons, right? So when the command came to switch, it riled them up, and they started saying, "What's the deal with this Prophet? One day he says face this way, one day he says face that way. So why does he keep changing it?" Right? So this caused a fitna for some believers. They actually left Islam as a result of that. It's like, oh, what's this nonsense? And of course, these are the hypocrites who are trying to make a scene. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in the Quran. وَمَا جَعَلْنَا قِبْلَةَ الَّتِي كُنْتَ عَلَيْهَا إِلَّا لِنَعْلَمَ مَنْ يَتَّبِعُ الرَّسُولِ مِمَّنْ يَنْقَلِبُ عَلَى عَقِبَيْهِ. Now we did this so that we see who's going to actually follow you or who's just going to turn away. So it was a test for believers, and then for the mushrikeen, for the polytheists, right, who the Kaaba is important to them. And it's important to them, why? Because of Ibrahim alayhi salam. It was important to them for lineage, tribal reasons, not for theological reasons. So when the believers faced Jerusalem for 16 months, that really upset the mushrikeen. It really upset Quraysh. And they would say things like, you have left the way of your fathers. You have left the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam. But when the Qibla was now changed again, what did that indicate to Quraysh? We follow or we face the Kaaba not for the reasons you told us. When it was about culture and lineage, we were facing Jerusalem, which is a theological symbol. So when we turned back to Mecca, it's for theological reasons. We were commanded to by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so our facing of Mecca, although the Kaaba was built by Ibrahim and Mecca was established by Ismail, we face the Kaaba as a command from Allah, not because of any lineage purpose or any lineage reason. So this was a huge event that had major social and political implications. Part of this, as I mentioned earlier, is that Salah in these verses is referred to as Iman. وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُضِيعَ إِيمَانَكُمْ. So Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala is saying that Salah is a huge part of Iman. Don't play around with it. The stronger your Salah is, then inshallah the stronger your Iman is. The next chapter, باب حسن إسلام المرء. عن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله تعالى عنه أنه سمع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إذا أسلم العبد فحسن إسلامه يكفر الله عنه كل سيئة كان زلفها وكان بعد ذلك القصاص الحسنة بعشر أمثالها إلى 700 ضعف والسيئة بمثلها إلا أن يتجاوز الله عنها. So this chapter is titled that حسن إسلام المرء. When a person's Islam is excellent, it's sound. Right? Now there is a well-known hadith that this is alluding to. So sometimes Bukhari, when there is a hadith that he himself accepts, but it doesn't reach the standard of his book, then he will use it as a title of a title within the book to allude to it. So we know that the Prophet ﷺ says it is among good iman, good belief, that you leave that which you don't have business in. You mind your own business. Part of good iman is minding your own business, not putting your nose in other people's business. So he's alluding to that here. But the hadith that he uses is as follows. The Prophet ﷺ said, if somebody becomes a Muslim and their Islam is good, because in my experience, anybody who does da'wah, anybody who works with people who enter the faith, there are some people who enter the faith and they stay in and they grow and they learn and they're part of the community, and it's clear that they have absorbed the faith. And there are others, it's not really the case. It's really questionable. Not that we tell them, no, you're not really Muslims, while they themselves identify as Muslims, but you just don't really feel like they absorb it. There's some other reason they accepted Islam. Is to get married, their husband is a Muslim, so they have to become a Muslim in order to, get the acceptance of the other's parents and whatnot. They say they're Muslim, but the way they practice it, the way they live, it's not showing it. Let's put it that way. So here the Prophet ﷺ saying that there's tremendous reward for the one who becomes a Muslim, but under the condition that their Islam is hasan, their Islam is good, sound. What is that reward? Excuse me. The reward is Allah will remove all of their sins that they have acquired prior to becoming a believer. Right? Kana zalafaha, that they had prior to becoming a believer. And afterwards, they are held to the same standards as believers, right? So what they did before Islam is overlooked, excused, ignored, except the exception to that is the rights of other people. So if somebody took the right of somebody else, their Islam does not exonerate them from that. They still need to restore those rights to that person, as is mentioned in another hadith. So for example, if somebody took a loan from someone, right, they still have to pay it back after becoming a Muslim. It's not that they become a Muslim and everything is excused, don't worry about anything. No, they have to pay it back. Right? But after Islam, they're held to the same standards as any other believer. If they do something wrong, then they're held accountable to that as per Islam. وَالْحَسَنَةُ بِعَشْرِ أَمْثَالِهَا. A good deed is multiplied by 10. Or it's multiplied to 700 or more than that, as is well known to Muslims and as is mentioned in the Quran. وَالسَّيِّئَةُ بِمِثْلِهَا إِلَّا يَتَجَاوَزَ اللَّهُ عَنْهَا. Whereas a sin is only we're only accountable for our sins, as one sin is counted, right? Our sins aren't multiplied for no reason. So when we do a sin, we get the sin of doing that action. It's not multiplied unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, pardons us for those sins and, He excuses us of them. So what's the point here, or one of the points here, is that in order to reap the fruits and the rewards of Islam, of being a believer, it must come with good Islam. Meaning not everybody is going to reap these rewards. Only those whose Islam is good, is in a healthy state. So this is what we can infer from this, is that, as we've talked about before, some people's Iman is healthy, and other people's Iman, it's not healthy. Those whose Iman is healthy will get more reward than those whose Iman is not healthy. Right? So this whole notion that we hear so much from people that, Allah knows what's in my heart, I can do whatever I want. Oh, it's enough that I say La ilaha illallah, Allah forgives everything else. Oh, I'm just a good human being, that's enough and I don't need to worry about anything else. It's not the way it works. Right? If the Prophet ﷺ, in his time, where people had access to the most pristine understanding of the religion, where there were no deviations, innovations, and or any of that, and the Prophet says that some people, their Islam is good, and some people, their Islam is not good. Right? So we need to be careful of this, and we need to be aware of the state of our Iman, the health of our Iman. The next chapter, باب أحب الدين إلى الله أدومه. This chapter is titled The most beloved faith to Allah is that which is consistent. Meaning, the most beloved way, it is most beloved to Allah that when you practice your faith, you do it consistently, or in a way that you can do it consistently. So Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha narrates that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam دخل عليها وعندها امرأة فقال من هذه؟ قالت فلانة تذكر من صلاتها. قال ما عليكم بما تطيقون فوالله لا يمل الله حتى تملوا وكان أحب الدين إليه ما داوم عليه صاحبه. So Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha was hosting somebody, and the Prophet ﷺ, after she left, asked her, who was this lady? And she said, this is so-and-so. She is known for how much she prays. She is known for how much she prays. People know her for how much she prays. And the Prophet ﷺ said, he wasn't very impressed. Right? He wasn't impressed. Why? Was it because what she was doing is unimpressive? Or how much she was doing is unimpressive? No. But rather, the question that came to his mind is, will she be able to continuously do this? How long can she sustain this before it becomes too burdensome, or before life plays its role and the person becomes more busy, which we all know happens, and then she stops doing it? So the Prophet ﷺ says, I'm not really impressed. I am advising you to do that which you are easily, or that which you are capable of sustaining. Do that which you are capable of sustaining. For wallahi, he says, by Allah, Allah does not stop documenting reward for you until you get bored, until you stop doing actions. Meaning, so long as you're doing actions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is documenting, He's giving you. But when does that stop? When the person stops. So He's giving us an image here that you want to practice Islam in a way where you can consistently do it. You can sustain it. You're not going to do too much to where you do it for a week and then you stop. Sometimes we get this charge. You go to Umrah, you come back, you're charged. So I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. You try to do a lot, but with time, it just gradually decreases until you don't do it anymore. Or Ramadan, for example. You do a lot, you're charged, you want to do more, and once Ramadan ends, I'm going to keep doing this and that. You try doing it, not sustainable, and then you stop doing it all, right? So we need to be careful in terms of how we apply the religion. And then the Prophet comments and says, it is beloved to Allah when you are consistent. Meaning, when do I know how I'm practicing Islam is beloved to Allah? And this is a very interesting way of putting it. Meaning there are some people who practice the religion in a way that's not pleasing to Allah. They're practicing, but it's not pleasing to Allah. Prime example is the Khawarij. Right? These extremists. Praying all night, fasting all day, every day, reading Quran left and right, practicing every single small, big, medium-sized sunnah. Right? You look at them, as the Prophet told the companions, you'll look at them and you'll feel like, man, I'm not doing anything. But they're the worst of the worst. Their religiosity is not pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you look in the mirror and you see yourself as somebody who prays and you do and you fast and don't be impressed. Because although you might be doing what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah might not be pleased with how you're practicing the faith.
If someone is doing this all day, all night, where do they make the living? How do they survive?
I don't know, you can ask them. They're getting money from the sky, right? So the point here is there's a healthy way of practicing the faith and there's an unhealthy way of practicing the faith. So in the last hadith, I commented on those who are very negligent to practice the faith, making excuses like, I'm a believer, Allah knows what's in my heart. Well, there's another extreme to that. And that is the extreme of, I'm going to go all out. And that makes me somehow better. No. Practice the moderation. Practice being moderate, right? Middle path. Right? And how do we do that? We apply the faith in a way we can comfortably continue to do consistently. So we go to Umrah, we come back, we're charged. I want to do so much more, I want to do so much more. No, hold on. It is better for you to incorporate one new sunnah that you will continue to do over the years than for you to try and do all of them and then you won't be able to continue to do any of them, right? So for example, you go do Umrah or you're doing Ramadan and you start doing the sunnah prayers and you're doing qiyam prayers and you're giving more charity and whatnot. You can't do all of that outside of Ramadan. So why not choose one? You know what? I'm going to continue to do my sunnah prayers. Incorporate that one thing in your life if you haven't been doing it before and continue to do it. It shouldn't be too difficult to do your sunnah prayers before and after the various salahs. And if you're able to incorporate that, now you'll be able to consistently do it. But to say that every night I'm going to pray qiyam al-layl as I used to do, maybe some people can, but if you're not that kind of person, don't overdo it. Right? So the point here is slow and steady wins the race. But sprinting at once will wear you out. And even if you were to look at it from number-wise, if you were to calculate this, if we say doing the 12 rak'ahs of sunnah per day, let's just say you get 100 hasanat for it. This isn't like actual numbers. I'm just making it up to make it a little bit easier to understand the comparison here. Right? You get 100 hasanat per day. And you do this over the course of 50 years. How much does that add up to? A lot. But if you do all the sunnah prayers, and you do extra nafil prayers, and you do qiyam al-layl, and you're able to sustain this for 3 months, but then it wears you out, and each day you were doing this, you were getting 1,000,000 hasanat, Well, which one is going to add up to be more? 100 hasanat every day for 50 years, or 1,000,000 hasanat every day for 3 months? Right? This is how the Prophet ﷺ is looking at it. Incorporate something, one thing new. When you exit Ramadan and you're doing more in Ramadan, take one thing that you feel will be easily incorporatable in your life and do that. And then next Ramadan, choose something else, because you'll already kind of incorporated the previous one. Choose something else, incorporate that. And this is how you build yourself, right? We're not interested in people who go from 0 to 100 in a second. That's not the way it works. We're interested in people who gradually build their iman in a way that they can continue to do it, right? All right. The next hadith. باب زيادة الإيمان ونقصانه. عن أنس رضي الله تعالى عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: يخرج من النار من قال لا إله إلا الله وفي قلبه وزن شعيرة من خير، ويخرج من النار من قال لا إله إلا الله وفي قلبه وزن برة من خير، ويخرج من النار من قال لا إله إلا الله وفي قلبه وزن ذرة من خير. In this hadith, Anas radiallahu ta'ala an, actually the translation of the title of the chapter is Iman increases and decreases. Now this is a conversation that was being had in the time of Bukhari. What is the reality of Iman? Does it grow? Is it the same? Is it one thing? And there was a group that claimed, and I believe I already shared this, but there was a group by the name of Al-Murji'ah that claimed that Iman is one. There's no variation in strength of Iman. Everybody has the same level of Iman. So Abu Bakr and, take a very bad Muslim, they're the same. They have the same level of Iman. So Bukhari comes and says that's not true. Quran and Sunnah negate that. And they negate it by saying that Iman increases and decreases. Right? So in the Quran, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِيَزْدَادُوا إِيمَانًا مَعَ إِيمَانِهِمْ, that they will increase Iman on top of the Iman that they already have. فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا فَزَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَهُمْ يَسْتَبْشِرُونَ. As for the believers, when verses of the Quran are revealed, it increases their Iman. وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ فَزَادَتْهُمْ رِجْسًا إِلَى رِجْسِهِمْ. But for those who have an illness in their heart, the revelation of Quran actually increases their rebellion. It worsens their spiritual state. So here these verses are indicating that Iman fluctuates. It's never the same. It's never stagnant. And that good deeds increase your Iman. Tests and trials in life increase your Iman, potentially. Or it could decrease. Your actions can decrease your Iman, harm it. Likewise, how you react to trials and tribulations can decrease your Iman. And in this hadith, Anas radiallahu ta'ala an says that the Prophet ﷺ said that people will exit the hellfire, or the ones who believed in La ilaha illallah and they had a very small amount of Iman in their heart will exit the hellfire. What is this telling us here? What it's telling us here is some believers, a portion of believers, whether from the ummah of Muhammad ﷺ or the ummah of Musa or whoever, some believers will enter hellfire. They are believers. They will enter hellfire. While other believers will enter paradise. Well, why did they enter paradise and they entered hellfire? Based on what? I mean, are they the same? And Allah just randomly selected some people to go to hellfire and randomly selected some people to go to paradise? Absolutely not. There's an equation here. There are reasons, there's logic behind it. And the logic is those who entered paradise had a level of Iman that allowed them to enter paradise and got them Allah's mercy, while those who entered hellfire did not have that level of Iman. So they entered hellfire. And even in this hadith, excuse me, the Prophet ﷺ says that some people enter hellfire and there is a grain's worth of, or a grain of cereal worth of Iman. And there's another group whose level of Iman is that of a of grain, even smaller. And another group whose level of iman is even smaller than that. Like there's just a tiny dot of iman in their hearts. And they were in hellfire, they will leave and enter paradise. So you see the difference. Even when it comes to how weak people's iman is, there's variation, there's differentiation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, just like you see that people vary in terms of what they have in this world. Some people have a lot, some people have very little. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, وَلَلْآخِرَةُ أَكْبَرُ دَرَجَاتٍ وَأَكْبَرُ تَفْضِيلًا. The afterlife is even greater in its variations. Some people have way, way, way more, and some people have way, way, way less, right? So, when we practice Ramadan and we fast and we do these things and we give charity, we can't see it as merely we're doing good deeds. We need to see it as we are reinforcing our iman, we're strengthening our iman. I mean, if a person leaves Ramadan and their iman is at the same level as when they entered Ramadan, right? Look, what happened? What happened? What a failure. And I'm talking to myself before I talk to anyone else. What a failure. You have a month where you're doing so much more good deeds, yet you leave the Ramadan, and as though those deeds didn't do much for you. You may have gotten hasanat, but you lost something greater, and that is the reinforcement or the growth of your iman. And that's what Ramadan is meant to do for us, to grow our iman. And some people, they do. Some people's iman, it grows. So, we are responsible for maintaining our iman. And that means we no longer look at our good deeds as simply the accumulation of good deeds. It's more than that. It is about the growth of your iman. And when we do sins, we cannot look at it as simply, I got some bad deeds that I need to do istighfar for. No, it weakens your iman. And although you might do istighfar, you may damage your iman in a way that takes a long time to recover from. And so instead of being in a upward trajectory, you're in a battle just to get out of that hole that sin put you in. Right? So it's pretty heavy stuff. And the second hadith in this chapter, عن عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله تعالى عنه أن رجلا من اليهود قال له يا أمير المؤمنين آية في كتابكم تقرؤونها لو علينا معشر اليهود نزلت لاتخذنا ذلك اليوم عيدا. قال أي آية هي؟ قال اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. فقال عمر قد عرفنا ذلك اليوم والبكاء الذي نزلت فيه على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو قائم بعرفة يوم جمعة. In this hadith, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he was the Khalifa, a Jewish individual came to him and said, O leader of the believers, there is a verse in the Quran that you all read. If it was revealed to us Jews, we would take that day as a day of celebration, as a holiday. And Umar asked, and what verse is that? And so he said the verse, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم. This is in Surah Al-Ma'idah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, today I have perfected your religion. I have perfected the religion for you, and I have completed my favor upon you, and I am pleased for Islam to be your religion. Right? So this verse is a very, very significant verse in that it indicates the climax. Right? The climax here. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala an responds and says, I know where that verse was revealed and when. It was revealed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam while he was standing on the hill of Arafah, where the first ritual of Hajj, Mount Arafah. The Prophet was there, and it was the day of Jum'ah. It was Friday. What is he really responding to this Jewish man?
Celebrate every Friday.
Right? It is a celebration for us.
Every day, every Friday.
Because Friday is a celebration and the day of Arafah is a celebration. Why didn't this Jewish man see that? Perhaps he didn't realize that it is a day of celebration for us because the way we celebrate is through ibadah. When we celebrate something, we do it through ibadah. So when we celebrate the day of Eid, how do we celebrate it? By praying Salat al-Eid. We celebrate or we commemorate Allah saving Musa. How do we commemorate it? By fasting the day of Ashura. How do we commemorate this verse? By fasting the day of Arafah, right? That's how we celebrate, through ibadah. So perhaps this Jewish individual didn't see that because maybe the way they used to celebrate things is different. So the Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, although he didn't immediately or directly say this, but what he's saying is, it is a day of celebration. It came down on a Friday, which is a day of Eid, for our weekly Eid, and then the day of Arafah, which is a type of Eid. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm coughing like this.
I think it's something in here,
Maybe.
Clean some chemical or something?
No, they cleaned the carpets the other day. Anyway, so that's one. Now, why is this hadith in this chapter? There's seemingly no indication of increase in iman or decrease in iman. But perhaps the reason is that when Allah says, today I have perfected for you your religion, and I have completed my favor upon you, and I am pleased with Islam as your religion, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indicating is that you have been growing till this point. Before, the favor hasn't been completed. There's still room for more. There's still room for growth. So they grew. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Umar radiallahu ta'ala an says that when he heard this verse, it made him sad. Because he understood this verse as meaning this is the height. Yeah. This is the highest. You're at perfection right now. What else? What's left? Except a decline. It might not be a sharp decline, but it'll be up and down. We will never reach this point again. So Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala is alluding to this meaning, saying that, well, there was a point of time where perfection was reached, or what is humanly possible to what is as humanly possible as perfection was reached in this moment, and then there's no way of surpassing that. It's either you maintain it or you just go down. So that meaning is coming through this hadith. Bab az-zakatu min al-Islam. Zakah is part of Islam, meaning zakat al-mal, giving the yearly zakat. عن طلحة بن عبيد الله رضي الله تعالى عنه يقول جاء رجل من أهل نجد إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثائر الرأس نسمع دوي صوته ولا نفقه ما يقول حتى دنا فإذا هو يسأل عن الإسلام فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم 5 صلوات في اليوم والليلة فقال هل علي غيرها قال لا إلا أن تتطوع قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وصيام رمضان قال هل علي غيره قال لا إلا أن تتطوع قال وذكر له رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الزكاة قال هل علي غيرها قال لا إلا أن تتطوع قال فأدبر الرجل وهو يقول والله لا أزيد على هذا ولا أنقص قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أفلح إن صدق. So in this hadith, the companion said that a Bedouin man came to the Prophet ﷺ and started asking him questions. And the Prophet responded by saying that, or the question was about Islam. How do I practice this? What do I need to practice? The Prophet said 5 daily prayers. Number 1, 5 daily prayers. And the man asked, is there any more than the 5 daily prayers? The Prophet said, no, except if you want to do tatawwa, nafil. And then the Prophet said, and you have to fast Ramadan. And the man asked, do I have to fast other than Ramadan? And the Prophet said, no, except if you want to do extra. And then the Prophet ﷺ told him he had to give zakah. And the man said, do I have to do anything beyond zakah? Meaning, do I have to give charity outside of zakah? And the man said, no, except if you want to, do extra. So the man left and said, Wallahi, I will not do more than what was told of me, asked of me, and I won't do less. I'll only do the bare minimum. The companions being around, they're hearing this, they're shocked. It's like, what do you mean he won't do more? They saw that as very rude and very unambitious. So the Prophet ﷺ said, he will be successful if he is truthful. Meaning if he actually does that, he will succeed. He will make it to paradise. So what we're learning here is that although Iman increases and decreases, if somebody is doing the bare minimum, even if it's the bare minimum, they are successful. So when we look at people who we might perceive as having less Iman than us, that's not grounds for us to look down upon them. If somebody is doing what they're supposed to do, even if it's the bare minimum, the Prophet is saying they're successful. So we should see those people as successful. We should look at them as, oh, I'm doing more than them, and that means I'm more successful than them. No. You're successful, inshallah, and they're successful as well. So although we want to be people who are constantly growing their Iman and increasing in Iman, and we want to stay away from the things that harm or decrease our Iman, at the same time, we need to make sure that that doesn't convert into this obsession of I have to do way more, and anybody who's doing less than me is inferior. It's not the way it works, right? Now, part of Iman is giving zakah. Why is this being even questioned? Why is this being presented by Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala? And the reason or perhaps the reason is that after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, a large chunk of Arabia stopped giving their zakah. They refused to give zakah. Why? Because that was just something we gave to the Prophet. We don't give it to anyone else. So Bukhari is coming and saying that zakah is intertwined with Iman. It has nothing to do with the Prophet as a person, alayhi salatu wasalam. Right? Zakah wasn't just this economic strategy to build the economy for the believers, and now that the economy has been established, it's no longer needed. And that's not what's going on. Right? Zakah is part of your Iman practices. It's not tied to the Prophet. So whether the Prophet is there commanding you and asking or not, zakah is still an obligation. And it's a huge obligation. And the punishment for those who refuse to give their zakah is quite severe. Quite severe. On the Day of Judgment, the Prophet ﷺ says that you will see somebody who will be stomped over by a herd or a flock of camel or sheep or cows. Who are they? These are the people who didn't give their zakah in their cattle, or those who didn't give their zakah of money, right? Cash or gold and silver. A snake will come and constantly constrict them. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that fire will burn their foreheads and their sides and their backs. So it's very severe. And what is Allah asking of a person? I'm not talking to you like you. I'm talking to anyone who listens to this. What is Allah asking of someone? 2.5%. It's very small. It's very little. And no, your taxes don't count as zakah. They don't count as zakah. Because number one, zakah is meant to go to poor people. Taxes don't go to poor people, or maybe only a small portion go to poor people.
They're actually killing people.
Right? So zakah has its role. It's meant to make sure that the poor people have enough to continue. So make sure anybody who's listening, they give their zakah. There's a lot of reward in it. Allah promises to replenish it and give you more. So zakah is part of a person's iman, a part of their Islam. Somebody who does not give zakah then a major part of their iman and their relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is missing, and that's detrimental to their overall iman. Stop there. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in.